In this lesson, we are going to study about counting methods. How can you show all possibilities? Let's take an example. Band members are served a breakfast bag whenever they play a Saturday morning concert. Students use the form at the right to place their order. So let us look at the breakfast form bag. You have beverages, two types of beverages, milk and orange juice. And you have three types of muffins, blueberry, cranberry and bran. And you have three types of fruits, apple, pear and banana. So this is what the breakfast bag contains. Now let us see what are the possible choices you can have. Show all the different kinds of breakfast bags. One way of showing it is called a tree diagram. Let's take, for example, you chose the beverage milk. Then if you choose milk as the beverage, then to choose muffins, you have three options, blueberry, cranberry and bran. So, blueberry, cranberry and bran. Now, if you choose, say, blueberry, and in fruits, you have three choices, apple, pear and banana. So, one of the breakfast bags can be milk, then you choose blueberry as muffin, and then apple juice. So, this is one breakfast bag. Another combination can be, you choose milk, blueberry and pear. Another combination can be milk, blueberry and banana. Suppose you choose cranberry as the muffin. Then you have milk, cranberry and apple juice and so on. Can you see that? These are the different combinations of breakfast bags you can have. So forming a diagram like this is called a tree diagram. There's another way of knowing how many choices you can have. Just by preparing a list, making an organized list. Let's take you chose milk. Then you can choose blueberry as a muffin. And then you can choose apple juice. Then another choice is you can choose milk, blueberry and pear as the apple juice, as the fruit juice. You can choose the third option, milk, blueberry and banana as a juice, and so on if you observe. So this is another way of listing all the options. One way is the tree method and the other way is the organized list method. Explain how to count the different breakfast bags in the tree diagram. Let's look at the tree diagram. How do we count the total number of choices you have? We count the last branch of the tree. We count these branches. So how many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So we have a total of 18 choices to make. So explain how to count the different breakfast bags in the tree diagram. Count the number of different combinations listed in the far right branches. How can you count possibilities using multiplication? The same counting can be done using multiplication. Both the tree diagram and the list show that there are 18 possible choices for the breakfast bags, as we saw. In the tree diagram, we saw there are 18 choices of breakfast bags. Similarly, over here, if you count, you have 18 choices to make. And now we can use multiplication. Instead of counting all the possible choices, you can use multiplication. How do we do that? Let us see. What are the choices of beverage you have? You have 2 choices of beverage. Let's write it down. What are the choices of muffins you have? You have 3 choices of muffins: blueberry, cranberry, and brown. So we write down 3 choices of muffins. What are the choices of fruits you have? You have 3 choices of fruits: apple, pear, and banana. Multiply them all. So 2 times 3, 6. 6 times 3, 18. So you have a total of 18 choices to make. You can use multiplication to know the number of choices. When you multiply to find the total number of choices, you are using the counting principle. So what principle are you using if you apply multiplication to find the total number of choices? You are using counting principle. Suppose hot chocolate is added as a beverage option. Milk, orange juice, let's add another one, hot chocolate as a beverage. How many different breakfast bags are there to choose from? Now, what are the choices of beverage you have? You have 3 choices of beverage. Muffins remains the same, 3. Choices of fruit remains the same, 3. So now the total number of choices will be 3 times 3, 9. 9 times 3, 27. So you will have a total of 27 choices to make. How can you count possible outcomes? An event is the result or outcome of a single experiment. So when you do an experiment and the result what you get, that is called an outcome of the experiment, or it is also called as an event. For example, you might toss a number cube and get a 4. So 4 is the outcome of tossing the number cube, or 4 is the event of that experiment. The set of all possible outcomes of an experiment is the sample space. What does it mean? Let's take the cube. If you toss the cube, say you land up with 1. Is 1 an outcome of that tossing? Yes. Say you toss it again and you land up with 2. Is 2 the outcome of that tossing? Yes. Say you toss up again and you land up with 3. Is 3 the outcome? And so on. 4, 5, 6. So all this is called the sample space for tossing a cube. The set of all possible outcomes of an experiment is called the sample space. Make a tree diagram to show all the possible outcomes if you toss a coin 3 times. You know, a coin has 2 sides, heads and tails. If this is heads and the one behind it is tails. So if you toss a coin 3 times, what are the possible outcomes you can list down? Let us see. For the first time when you toss, let us take you land up with heads. Now you're ready to toss for the second time. So when you're tossing for the second time, it could be either heads again or tails. Now let's take the second time also you landed up with heads. Now the third time when you're about to toss, either it could be heads or tails again. Say you landed up with heads again for the third time. So one possible outcome of tossing the coin 3 times is heads, heads, and heads. Another possible outcome could be heads, heads, and tails. Another possible outcome could be heads, tails, and heads. And you can go on listing down. So, how many possible outcomes will there be if you toss a coin 3 times? There are 8 possible, because if you count them, it's 8 possible outcomes. Make a tree diagram to show all the possible outcomes if you toss a coin 3 times. We know that in a coin, one side is heads and the other side is tails. So if we toss this coin 3 times, what are the possible outcomes which we will get? We will see. We will draw a tree diagram. Let's take for the first time when we toss, we land up with heads. Now we have to toss for the second time. Now if we have to toss for the second time, we may land up with heads or we may land up with tails. Say we landed up with heads also the second time. Now when we are ready to toss up the third time, we may again land up with heads or with tails. Let's take we landed up with heads again. So one possibility of tossing a coin 3 times is we may land up with heads, heads, and heads. The second possibility could be heads, heads, and tails, and so on. So there are 8 possible outcomes when we toss the coin 3 times. Make a list to show all the possible outcomes if you toss a number cube and toss a coin. So let's see, you're tossing a number cube and a coin. So let's take for the first time, if you toss the number cube, it lands up with 1. And when you toss the coin, it lands up with heads. Or it could be that the cube will land up with 1 and the coin will land up with tails. Or it could be that the cube will land up with 2 and the coin will land up with heads. And so on, you can have the combinations. So there are 12 possible outcomes in this case. Use multiplication to find the total number of possible outcomes if you spin each spinner once. We will use multiplication. What is this principle called? It's called counting principle. Remember that? It's called counting principle. Now in the first wheel, if you see, what are the choices for the first spinner? There are 5 choices. 3, 4, 5. So there are 5 choices. In the second spinner, there are 4 choices. So what are the total possible outcomes? Multiply them. 5 times 4, 20. So there are 20 possible outcomes for the 2 spinners. If you toss a number cube, what is the sample space? Meaning, what are the possible outcomes if you toss a number cube? It will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you toss 2 number cubes, how many possible outcomes are there? So let's use multiplication. What are the possible outcomes of 1 number cube? 6. What are the possible outcomes of the second number cube? 6. So multiply them. So there will be 36 possible outcomes for the number cube.